Now it's time to construct the flowers. So how do you get all of these little pieces to turn into this flower? And it's really simple. It's a few minutes and hot glue. So what do you do first? Well, you kind of lay your petals out the way they're going to go. Each flower comes with a step-by-step guide on the layers, what you do first, what you do second. They're all in the book. So it's really easy because it can start to look like a little confusing when you first see it. So the poppy is kind of made with these two flowers, these two petals forming a bit of a bowl, and then these other two petals added to it. So I'm going to start by molding these petals. So again, scrunch it up, like move it, just like that. Like you want these to have a little bit of motion. They shouldn't look flat. So I'll kind of make that shape, and I add some glue underneath it. Again, the glue is what gives it structure. Like if you had a silk flower, they have basically wire. So wire is what it enables you to bend leaves and things like that. The glue is much faster than trying to add wire to all these. So again, I'll do my first petal shape. Then again, I'll mold my second petal. And embroidery is very strong. You don't have to be afraid to kind of force it into the shape you want. And the glue will allow it to maintain that shape. So you just run the glue back and forth and kind of smooth it out a little. So that's our two main petals. And you see if I lay them down, how they don't sit perfectly flat. And I'll do the same thing with the third petal. Again, just keep molding it. You can wet it if you need to. If you do wet it, you would shape it the way you want it and let it dry, which takes, sometimes could take a few hours. So they absorb a lot. Now that'll take a couple seconds to dry. This is the last petal. Again, just a slight curve. You kind of see it like what I did there. You want to make sure that the glue is dry before you do the next step. The first two pretty much dried already. So now you would add a little bit of glue to the A petal. They're all numbered. I would add a little bit of more right there. So you see these two are stuck together now, just like that. Okay. And then I would add this one. Goes right there. And then this one, just a little bit more glue on it. That one gets added in like that. And while it's drying, you can shape it a little bit. I think my finger's glued to it. Okay, we're good. And then the last step is that little center. So I would add a little bit of glue to that. There's your flower. So depending on your project will depend on how many you need. But just this one flower will look amazing on anything you put it on. So basically, you start with piece A, and each of the pieces are numbered. And what I do is I kind of turn it over, and you can get it slightly damp again, and that reactivates the stabilizer that's in there. Or you could just shape it just like this. So I kind of you can go around a bowl, and I'll take my glue gun and just kind of put little beads of glue down the petals. And what the glue does, this kind of almost acts like wire would, is once you mold it into the shape you want, and again, be very careful because it's hot, and you'll see that it'll dry and retain that shape. So I'll kind of leave it there. You don't want it to be like really curved like that. You want it to be just like a slight curve to it. So again, I do it by just kind of molding the leaves so they're not flat. Again, traditionally embroidery is always flat, so now it's got a little bit of a curve to it. And then again, just go up and down with the glue. And what that will do is, again, it dries and it retains this shape. So it's a little trick I kind of came up with when I did the butterflies. And I'll just let those two, you might have to hold it a little bit, until it dries, because what you don't want to do is get it flat, because then it'll dry that way. So you can kind of lay it over the edge of a bowl or anything along those lines. So now, what I would do, once this is dry, you would turn it over. I would put a little bit of glue on this one, which is piece B, and add it like that. And then I take the centerpiece, which would be piece C. Some of the flowers have 5 layers, some have 2 or 3 layers. And you can see that that is how you get your dimensional flower. You can do different colors, different versions. They're all essentially made the same way. Okay, now I'm going to show you the next flower. This is a magnolia. This one has leaves and 2 layers of flower and this little centerpiece, so 2 layers of petals. So now this one is a little harder to mold. So what I'm going to do is just get it slightly damp again. So by dampening it, the wet and gone activates. Now the downside to having, to get it wet again is that it takes a little bit of time to dry. But I kind of add the glue while it's wet. So again, I just kind of run a little bit of glue over there, over the edges of the leaves, kind of like a spider web. You're not going to see it. And then I kind of mold it the way I want it, like that. So again, you want a little bit of a curve to it, and I can just kind of let it dry there. All right, so here's the next piece of the flower. Again, this is the base piece, so the bulk of the flower is in this sew-out. So again, I'll just mold it, again, dampen it or don't, depends on whether this holds that shape when you kind of play with it. And then again, I just add the glue underneath. Not a lot, but just enough. This is probably the biggest tip that I have, is to mold the flowers. Eventually, if you don't do this, the flowers will kind of flatten on their own. And again, here's the top part of the flower, and I'll just mold it. That's the cool part about thread, is that it'll retain that shape, but it won't permanently keep this shape. So that's where, the glue comes in handy. It doesn't take that long to do these. Again, I turn the leaves over. I'll add a little bit of glue there. I'll add this flower, petal, add a little bit more glue, add this flower petal, and then just a little bit more glue. Then you have the center. So you can see how it gives it dimension, and it's not flat. You don't need, like I said, you don't need a ton of curvature to it. You just need a little bit, and that's enough to create your dimensional flower.